Go and see how many grandmothers within 7 days, were raped in villages because they think that an 85-year-old grandmother is HIV free. Then they are targeted there.
Wow. Why would you say that?
Because, in these camps where we were, rape used to take place almost every day, Oh, yes, serious situations, They will say, we came, there will be soldiers around. And then they will say, they should protect these girls at night, As a matter of fact, they would come at night and rape, women. So I always think they don't agree with me because, they think I'm radical, But, this culture of rape,
Hello everybody, welcome again on City Show right now here in Bremen City. My name is Sidi Sherikan and today we have an amazing guest with us, Nomazulu, who is an amazing activist, a journalist from Zimbabwe. But nonetheless, today I have an amazing co-host who is nobody else but Lorrain, and she's going to introduce herself, and she's the one who is going to have this interview with Nomazulu. Anyway, guys, if you want to know more about CD Show, just watch us on YouTube and subscribe to our channel for you to get more inspiring videos. And here right now in our episode 3, it is funded and sponsored by Niedersachsen Landeszentrale for Politische Bildung. They are supporting this project so that we can at least bring the migration perspective in Germany. I'm your host, but my host today is Lorrain, and welcome to City Show, and we are glad to have you today in our show. I hope that you will have a wonderful interview with my colleague Lorrain.
So welcome to the City Show. My name is Lorrain, the host of the show today, the 3rd episode of the Migration Perspective. Guten Tag, willkommen zu der Show City Show, der Migrationsperspektive, die 3. Episode. Wir haben heute hier im Haus Nomazulu, die werde ich heute interviewen. I'm going to interview you today.
Yes.
I welcome you and thank you for having our time.
Thank you very much, Lorraine.
So, would you give us a brief introduction of yourself?
Yes. My name is Nomazulu Thata. I have lived here in Germany for about 45 years. I came to Germany in 1979, and it was East Germany then, and I was a student. Before I went to East Germany, I was a refugee in Zambia. I was born in Rhodesia. It was called Rhodesia then, and now it's Zimbabwe. So when I left, I was a minor then. When I left Rhodesia, it wasn't an independent country. That's why I had to leave.
Around which year was that?
That was 1973.
1973, okay.
Yes. I left Rhodesia and I went to Zambia. So my mother was eager for me to do secondary education. For some reason that I didn't know much, because I was young then, I found myself out of school because my mother was a politician, So children back then, they were punished together with the parents. So I'm not the only one in the family, my sister, and, we found ourselves out of school. We were told that it's not school for you.
How old were you then?
I was 12, 13 when I was a school dropout.
So it just happened from one day to the other?
Yes, we were not accepted in schools, so to speak. So my mother had to arrange for me to go outside Rhodesia then to Zambia. Zambia was independent at that time. So, this journey, from Rhodesia to Botswana, from Botswana to Zambia, I think it's a story for another time because it's very long and very painful. And not only that, I think it has got trauma, it's trauma related, it's not very easy to speak out. Trauma. I have spoken it out several times, yes. But it's only the effects of it. So when I arrived in Zambia, I went to a Catholic school. I was at a boarding school.
So that was then 1974?
That was 1974 when and then I finished because, you know, a young person, you know, you adjust, you know. I learned languages, local languages, and this Catholic school, we spoke English, and, you know, I was one of them, you know, in the school.
You were flourishing.
I was flourishing.
Beautiful.
Yeah, but, you know, I had to leave. When I finished, I had to leave. I was not supposed to go back to Rhodesia then.
Okay.
I was supposed to go to the camps, refugee camps. And that's where I landed, at the refugee camp, you know. And to make the story short again, our camp was bombed. Because, you know, there was war between Rhodesia and the freedom fighters, whose bases were in Zambia and Mozambique back then, you know. So I was at a camp for women and children. Somehow there was some mistake that was done, and this camp was bombed. You know, women and children, they died. So I remember my mother coming back. My mother was in Senegal then, you know. She was a chief representative of the party, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
When did she emerge to Senegal then? When you left the country as well, or did she part earlier?
You know, during my time when I was in Zambia, my mother was busy with politics at home. You get what I mean? Until she left, because she had to flee too, you know. And then she was stationed in Senegal. So my mother hears there is a camp bombed in Zambia. And that was the camp where I was. So she flew from Senegal to Zambia to find out, am I one of them? I think it is the trauma, seeing my mother, how shocked she was. You know, she didn't even ask, how did you survive in a camp like this? How? And I was not even in a position to tell my mother, how did I survive? You know, it's one of those things. Now, to cut the story short again, Eric Honecker from East Germany was visiting Zambia then. He was on a state visit. So he was told there is a civilian camp bombed. You know, it was a shock, the whole world. How this Smith regime would even bomb civilian camps, you know. So he came to visit us. And then one of the things that he said that I still know up to this day is that I am going to decongest this camp by taking as many of you who are able to enter universities and colleges. So I was one of them.
In Europe?
In East Germany.
Okay.
So I was one of those who qualified to get these scholarships. This is how I ended up in East Germany. And then when I was in East Germany, it's another shock again. I don't know whether you'll understand this shock that I had. You know, we arrived in Berlin, Schönefeld. And then
I was just going to ask you, where did you arrive? Because then, for many out there, you might, if you have ever seen Berlin or have been in Berlin and you have seen the width of Berlin, this is a city which has, not anymore, but had 4 airports. So Berlin-Schönefeld must be known to some of you out there, and this is where Nomazulu actually landed in
1979.
79. Okay.
So we go by buses from Berlin to Leipzig. So I was told, you go, take your suitcase and you go upstairs. And then I go upstairs, and who do I meet there? 2 white girls. And then I was told, you're going to live with these 2 white girls in this room. It was one room. You know,
was that a facility, or was that just
it was a student's hostel.
Okay.
Just like any other hostel. But then the thing is, You know, you come from a racist country like Rhodesia, and then suddenly you are told it was as normal as it can go.
Yeah.
You stay with these white girls, and then they will teach you German. The shock, you know.
Yeah.
It's this race shock and nothing else.
Yes.
You know.
Yes. Yeah. From everything that you have learned and
from
heard.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. From everything that I have heard, I've learned and seen. You know, there was strict racial segregation.
Yeah.
Strict.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, whites were on that side, blacks were on that side, you know. Not even toilets were, you know, nothing. Not even restaurants, you know, where, you know, there was a restaurant all for blacks and white. There was nothing like that in Rhodesia. It was just like in South Africa. It was an extension of apartheid in South Africa. It was in Rhodesia. Then suddenly, you know, and then it was only my shock, you know. Now how am I going to bath or something like that with these two young ladies, two white young ladies, you know. They were so kind.
I mean, now you're laughing about it because it seems also a little ridiculous, right? To even have that thought. And still, it was such a deep trauma for you and also something you were socialized into, right? I mean, it was something that was not good but normal.
Yes.
And then you come where the other thing should be normalized without announcing.
Yes.
Right?
Without announcing.
Yeah, I understand completely. Yeah.
And it was such a good relationship. I learned German early. We traveled together. We went to discos together. You know, it was just the three of us. You know, it was really so good. And each time I talk about German, how good German was. It was the life I lived in East Germany. You know, it pains me now when I hear that in East Germany, you know, there is so much race discrimination, this hate against the others, you know. During my time.
Sorry for interrupting, but did you ever, within your friendship there with the two white girls, as you say, ever experience racism? Now, if you reflect backwards, do you actually, like now, would say, okay, this was actually racial language, for example, or maybe that was a preconception, or maybe this was stereotyping about us Africans or black people in general?
It's a big question that I won't be able to answer adequately. You know why? When I arrived in East Germany, when you have been staying in a refugee camp where life and death was cigarette paper thin, there are things that could have been racist that you may not have recognized then.
Okay.
Coming from a country, you know, coming from the refugee camp, you know, and then suddenly, you know, East Germany compared to West Germany, they were big worlds apart. Zambia and East Germany, they were worlds apart, you know, and what I was grateful about and realizing what Eric Honegger's speech, you know, it was tight in me. Go to Germany, please study, come back, and Africa is yours. You know, your parents are fighting for political independence. You are going to fight for economic independence. This is exactly what Eric Honegger said.
He stood up,
And those words, they
stuck with you.
They stuck with me until today. You know, that I'm here in Germany, it's another story. It's another story altogether. So I was trying to emphasize your question, how difficult it is, because my situation then was not analytical at all. You know, I wouldn't have analyzed how far racist, how far. You know, what I know is that shock that vanished quickly, and it was now I have to learn. now I have to have this education. That was stuck in me, you know. I was good in maths, physics, chemistry, but the language itself, I don't know, it was a very big effort, you know, to qualify for a university. We're supposed to do language, and I was supposed to do extra physics, chemistry, and maths, you know, before subjects.
Yeah.
You know, they took me further because of the strength of the English and the chemistry and the, sorry, not English, physics, chemistry, and mathematics. That was my strength, but not the language. And then they kept on saying, look, you need to do what they call abitur, extra abitur, you know. That's what I did. I went to an engineer schule in Herbst, in Nordhausen.
Okay.
Yeah, in Nordhausen there, let me put it this way, I had to repeat German language, you know, but not other subjects, just the German.
So when you were, let me call it, in that bubble,
yes,
I'm choosing that word,
absolutely,
right?
Yes.
Did you ever have the feeling that now, because you're there and you have the privilege, right, to study, go back to school, further your education, and then with Haneka's words, also go back to your country and, you know, bring equality to, you know, also in Germany we would say Kaufkraft, right? For
yes,
people to be able to be self-sufficient at home, right? Did you ever think you had to perform better than anybody else you were studying with?
No.
No.
That I performed better. It was given, you know, that, you know, because it wasn't to outshine somebody else. It was to pass. So to pass mathematics, it was just given. To pass other subject, it was just. I struggled in German language, yeah, because they kept on saying, well, you need this German language ever to go to the university.
Yes.
Yeah, that was emphasized.
Okay.
Yeah, very much. I didn't have this age to compete to be better. No, really not. It was this age to manage the German language so that you go to the university and study.
I got you. Okay, so you had a clear goal, and that was the only thing that you were heading for.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. I get it. Yeah. So now you get to university.
I got, let me be frank, when I left Nordhausen, now to go to Freiburg and study metallurgy was a tall order.
Freiburg, so
yeah, I was supposed to go to Freiburg.
Yeah.
And then they said, no, go to Henningsdorf.
Okay.
It's an engineering school.
Yeah.
And with automatization. Automation, yes. So I went there, you know, it was a flow, you know, I was happy, you know. Each time I talk about Henningsdorf, I would like to talk about the freedom for the first time that I had in my life as a girl, you know. And then I was in Henningsdorf, and you know, you connect if you're students, you know. It was on Friday. Life was in East Berlin, you know. Yeah, where we went to, you know, discos, you know.
So now you're saying this.
You know what? I want to
before you ended up in Freiburg. Were you in a
no, I wasn't. I didn't go to Freiburg. I went to Henningsdorf. Instead of going to Freiburg University, I went to Henningsdorf,
right.
Because they emphasized automation. That my engineering should emphasize automation equally.
Yeah.
That's why I had to go to Henningsdorf.
Yes. As a mistake, the cities. But now you're saying clubs, right?
Yes, discos. Yeah.
Did you go before that time you reached to Henningsdorf? Did you go to a club before?
I have been, yes, in Leipzig.
Okay.
In Leipzig, I was in Leipzig 9 months, you know. Yeah, it was life off. But it was not the way it was in Henningsdorf, because Henningsdorf, it was near the big city, East Berlin, So there is one aspect of my life that I would like to emphasize so much. When I was in Henningsdorf, it was, this going to discos on Friday, coming late at night, by train. I would go and take a train from Ostkreuz to Henningsdorf Nord, Honestly, I would go alone from Henningsdorf North until to our school. That was about 3 k's away from the station. It was midnight, no buses, I would meet people, these people from the Kneipe, from beer halls and so forth.
Yeah.
Nobody touched me. And they knew that there is a black girl that moves around on Friday at night, Saturday at night, midnight. Honestly, something could have happened to me.
Yeah. Yes.
But if I say something happened, it won't be correct. It would be unfair. Because also I felt so safe.
That's amazing, because now looking at Berlin, Henningsdorf, I have a 16-year-old daughter. I would rather escort her than letting her walk down Henningsdorf. So that's an amazing experience.
It is really. That's why I'm so grateful to East Germaners. It's a pity politics has turned upside down, but back then, really, for me, that was the best place to be. For somebody who has got a history of, hardships. When I was in Rhodesia then, and when I was in Zambia, it was hardships like no other.
So speaking of this, right?
Yes.
As you are now starting to reflect, right?
Yes.
Your time as a refugee in Zimbabwe, today's Zimbabwe,
in Zambia.
How it shaped you in your today's life. Yeah.
A lot, because I'm in a position to empathize with young women that I see. When I see in Bremen North, for instance, there are quite a number of black women, African mothers, we call them, and each time I talk to them, their lives in many ways mirrors my own life, how it was back then with me. And it's easy then to connect. I can almost connect with any African woman there in Bremen North. We know each other. There was a time when I mentored them, really. Yeah. And then I had to start this radio project. So I told them that, look, when I get place, we can resume this mentorship, because honestly, we need each other. They are young women, and their stories touch me so much, because, it draws me very near to them, as somebody who has had that trauma before, Yeah, so in many ways, really, it does assist. I have got this feeling with time, I know how to speak to them. For instance, when we are together and they've got something very painful to speak, I let them speak. And then I let them tell them that, look, what you are telling me now, I know it too.
Yes.
And if you say that, they become comfortable.
Yes.
And then there is this trust that, so this is what I'm telling her, it's not new, but it's something that she went through. If I get the chance when she's talking like that, and then I tell her also my pieces of experience, that, look, this is how I managed a situation. I always tell my young ladies in Bremen North that, visit marketplaces, on Saturday, and connect, because I've got this feeling that, they are removed from the societies here.
Yeah.
You know, to be removed.
Isolated, right?
They are absolutely isolated. And, you know, they go to the church, they go to their own church. I said, it's good to have your own church and so forth, but try on one Sunday, go to a Catholic church. You know, just appear there. You'll be surprised the welcome that you'll get. If you go to the marketplace, just don't go around, you know, buy something. And then you just ask any old woman, how do you cook this in German? You know, you're connected. You see? Yeah, and you'll be surprised when you ask these old German women how excited they become when you ask them such.
Appreciative, almost, right?
Appreciate, yes, they appreciate it very much. You know, you connect and you become confident, you know, because most ladies, most African ladies, you see them when they get into the bus, you know, we lack confidence, you know, just alone entering the bus, you know.
So now going a little bit back into time, right? You sometimes mention the word trauma, right?
Yes.
So now going back into your early teenage time,
yes,
you were already dealing with a lot of, let's say, the adult world.
Yes.
Right? So what would you say during that time, what was the biggest challenge you had to face in let's say, on the emotional and social part of growing up during that time?
I suppose you mean in Rhodesia then?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Oh, yes. You know, my parents were teachers, and they divorced. And we were sent to parent substitutes. You know, my sister and me, we went to stay with our auntie. That was the sister to my father.
That was now before you had to flee, or around what year was that?
That was 60s. That was early 60s.
Okay, so you were much younger than the time that you are now going to face fleeing the country.
Yes, I was a lot. I was, I think, about 7 years, 8 years. Yes. So you talked about trauma. How was it? What traumatized you when you were young?
Yeah, like what was the biggest challenge, would you say, you faced in a very young age?
Yes, our lives as children, as girls, were not easy. You know, I was telling you about substitute parenting.
Right.
Yes, how dangerous it can be. You know, I was 8 and my sister was 10 when we experienced sexual abuse.
Oh my God. Yeah.
By an uncle who was an inspector.
I'm very sorry.
An uncle who was a policeman, you know. One would have thought, since he's a policeman,
right,
he's a man of the law, we're going to be protected. We were not. And my auntie was not in a position to realize, you know, you're a social worker, you know how difficult it is.
Yes.
For a child to report sex abuse.
Yes, we're still fighting for that it doesn't become a taboo topic.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, to the extent that my sister at 13, she got pregnant by this old man, you know. I didn't get pregnant because I was young.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
Until you get pregnant, something should have happened regularly, you know. So our father came to collect us, you know. So it was this stigma in a girl child that told me that you are bad.
Yes.
Intrinsically bad. You know, you are not in a position to sit properly. No wonder this uncle of yours had to rape you, you know. So, you know, you're a girl child, vulnerable. with a parental substitute.
Yes.
Substitute. And your position in that house is shaky, you know. Yes, there was enough food, yes. But food sometimes is not
Yes.
it's not the only factor, you know.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So that was the first trauma. The second trauma is when my father just sent me to a country school, you know. There was nobody I knew there, you know. So I did not manage this grade 7 examinations. So I had to go to town. You know, it was this going from one parental substitute to another parental substitute. You know, I wonder sometimes how I managed education because, you know, it was exchange of hands, you know, guardianships. That were men, I can't count them. Were they 6 or were they 7? You know? And then from those 7, where was I sexually abused? You know, when I was still a teen, you know. And, you know, abuse when you're a girl, it's not only sexual abuse. There is physical abuse too.
Yes.
Somehow or other, I landed in my brothers. My brothers had completed school. One brother of mine was a teacher. Somehow they thought, no, Nomazulu can't just go from one place to another. Let's take Nomazulu and stay with us. Honestly, I appreciate it. But there was another form of abuse, which was no longer sexual, but physical. You know, they were brothers, you know, and I was, you know, monitored, you know, here and there. I was only 15. But, you know, this monitoring, you know, so that you don't engage with boys and so forth. It was out of my head. Yeah. So I'll be beaten for
nothing that was
for flimsy things that, you know, didn't mean anything, you know.
So at this point, sorry for interrupting, but at this point your parents are not available for you.
No.
At this point you have gone through different houses and parenting.
Yes.
Now you end up with your sibling.
Yes.
And if I'm correct, it's just before emerging to the refugee camp. Am I correct?
No, because I couldn't go to my mother. My mother had married another man, so it was taboo. We're not supposed to go there.
Okay.
But then that man, that stepfather of ours, was very abusive.
Okay.
So my mother ran away. When my mother ran away, she came to stay with us. So it was my siblings and my mother and my sister, my younger sister. So that's when the idea came to my mother that, you know, Nomazulu cannot sit at home.
Yes.
She must do something. She must go back to school, you know. So going back to school was going back to another country altogether. That was Zambia. Zambia was an independent country then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So was maybe, I'm just assuming here, right?
Yes.
Education a way of fleeing? Because you said education was easy for you, and you also said that you don't know how you managed education at that point with that backpack that you already had,
Yes.
right? Full of trauma,
Yes.
right? And questioning, I guess, also yourself.
Yes.
Was education maybe something that helped you escape and flee?
No and yes. When you say it was fleeing, no.
No.
Because I'm the one who put my mother under great pressure. You know, I had friends around, you know, girlfriends. They were all going to school, secondary schools, and, you know, to admire them wearing those uniforms and, you know, I'm sure it was painful for my mother to see that because they would come home, coming from school with their uniforms. We would sit down and start eating. I knew exactly when they came. And then I would start cooking so that, you know, it was, you know, that time, you know, food was not a problem. I think socialization was a trend. It was something very important, you know, to connect. Somehow I wanted to connect always with these students pupils that went to school. I didn't want to connect with pupils that were dropouts, you know. Somehow I held myself together with the hope that one day I will go back to school, you know. I think going back to school was not fleeing something like that or something like that. It was a necessity. I knew that without education, I am nothing.
Yes.
Let me tell you one thing that is very painful, you know, because, you know, this uncle that I'm telling you about was an inspector, you know. Before he could rape, you know, he would tell me that you're going to be a prostitute anyway. So I feared that, you know, prostitute, you know. Because he used to bring those I knew what is a prostitute that time.
Obviously.
Because he used to bring those prostitutes at home. So I would look at the life of these women and then I say, what am I going to be? No. So the alternative was to go to school. So my going from Rhodesia via Botswana to Zambia was traumatic. But I would never say I'm going back.
Yes.
Because it was school, you know.
Yeah.
If the goal is you're going to school, you'll be at a boarding school, Catholic boarding school. So it was such a big thing, you know.
So was that maybe one of the mechanisms that you had to also cope?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Back then, in Rhodesia, education was, you know, known to be the, you know, to poverty, you know.
Yeah.
It journeyed out of poverty, you know, is to get education. Up to now, I'm still here.
Yeah.
And the way I brought up my son too, you know, I kind of fed my son to saying, you just have to have this education ever. You know, to be somebody here in Germany.
Yeah. Let's go back to where you're now still focusing. You're a young girl and you're still focusing on, you know, emerging, you know, pressuring your mom, going to school. You want that education. You want to have a life. You want to have a life of your own, right? It seems to me like you have a very strong personality from very young, because you could see this is something which would lead me into something maybe more positive of that what I'm experiencing right now, right? Did you have other coping mechanisms during that time? Can you remember anything, like maybe something that you would do or think of just to escape that?
Well, I would say survival strategies. Yeah.
Can you elaborate?
Yes. I had to be good to my brothers and to my mother. You know, showing my eagerness. I would go to the library.
To the, sorry?
Library.
Yeah.
Get books. I would read. I would take about 3 or 4 books. I'll start reading them so that my mother sees me reading, or my brothers.
Yes. Yeah. I totally understand. Yeah.
This eagerness, you know, this show that, look, you know, I love reading.
Yes.
Can I go back to school?
And I can read, right?
And I can read. So it used to happen that, you know, my second brother used to like reading too. So when he read something, that book that he read, he would start analyzing it when we are eating, you know, it is about this and that and that. And then I would do the same. But my brother was university, then he knew how to do it. But I would do the same. For instance, I would read the book and then I would start telling them what that book was about. You know, they laughed at me, you know, certainly, yes. But it was an effort, you know. So my mother would be impressed, but not my brother. My brothers would just laugh at me, you know.
Like coping mechanisms are very different, right? So you had a clear goal, and I'm really happy for your soul that you had a clear goal. For me, growing up, I had all types of mechanisms. One of them was to be unseen, right? Did you have similar experiences where you felt like, okay, now at this point I don't want anybody to see me, I don't want I'll be, as you say, so good in something that I want to achieve, what I want to get from them.
Yes.
Like, were there other things?
Unseen, no.
No.
I was a girl about town that wanted, it sounds stupid, but let me say it. I would go to the library, and then I would never put those books in the bag or something. But I would show everybody that, look, I'm holding books. And
yeah. I'm not in school, but I'm reading.
But I'm not in school, but I'm reading. And then this association. Which girls did I associate with? Which girls did I bring home wearing those uniforms? And what were we talking? And when my mother was there, she would hear us talking.
Yes.
It impressed my mother so much, And there was a time when I saw my mother crying, We sat there. I would wait for them to come and we eat together. So we would eat with knife and fork. No, knife and forks. Not that we knew how to eat with knife and forks. It was an experience. Yes. So each time I go to England, they remind me this. I've got these friends in England, and then they say, we learned how to eat with knife and fork at your place. It was this show of, look, perhaps I know how to eat with knife and fork, But it was a way of uplifting myself. I didn't know how.
How else?
How else? If I read, how else? Because they had a lot to show. And they used to take me to places, to, camps. These Christian camps. It was highly academic. These camps, there will be debates, and I was just out because, they were, near A levels or O levels, high above my pay grade.
So it also kept you motivated.
They kept me somehow. They accommodated. It's not that they pushed. They really accommodated me. In the way they did. That made me really very comfortable. All those things are indicators. All those things are mechanisms, or I don't know what to call it. Those are what are motivations. What motivated me mostly was the environment that I created myself, to be, this is what I would like to be.
So that sounds like a super skill, right? That you were able to create a surrounding for you. Now you were removed from there. Fast forward to the refugee camp.
Yes.
How did those skills that you had already, built for you play a role there? And did you learn other skills, maybe to, emotionally and physically, maybe, to survive literally the camps?
It was another situation altogether. A different situation altogether. I think I wrote that in detail in my book. I wrote a biography of myself.
Okay.
An autobiography myself.
What is the title?
It hasn't come out yet. I'll let you know when it comes out.
Yes, please do. Please do.
I had finished education, a university diver, so to speak. Before I went to the university, I had to stay in this refugee camp. So I think, knowing that, look, I had a brilliant certificate in my pocket. So I knew that, well, this is temporal. I am going to go to the university. And there were many universities that accepted me. I was accepted by the university in Zambia itself. I was accepted by the university in Lesotho. Botswana, Swaziland, and Lesotho. There is one university there. And then came Eric Honeka, giving us scholarships, saying that I am only taking those who are university qualifying. I was university qualifying, So I think it wasn't difficult to cope at the refugee camp. What was difficult was these bombings You know, because we didn't know when we were going to be bombed. You know, another camp would be bombed not very far from where we lived. So we didn't know when.
What happened in those situations? Like, you know, around us, obviously, there are other camps being bombed. You had your certificates here in your pocket?
No, I had my certificates at the school where I was. Like, so many things, I left them at the school.
Okay.
Yeah. So that when I go to take them, I'll be going to the university or, you know, they wouldn't have survived under those circumstances.
Okay.
You know, those circumstances were, you know.
So with all due respect, right? You mentioned some parts in your life which touch me so deeply, right? And thank you for sharing with us and being open and courageous enough to speak about topics which still till today are taboo topics. We're punished for it, especially as women, right? And in lots of parts of the world, actually, my opinion is all over the world, we're not supposed to talk about abuse, right? Especially not when we're speaking about abuse in our families or abuse, you know, which has been inflicted on us by superiors.
Yes.
Any type, right?
Yes.
My question is, we have an audience, right? And I bet you there's one or two people behind there who have similar experience, right? Maybe has a young girl. You know, we often don't speak about the aspect that also men, you know, are abused in this world. But maybe there's somebody who you have a few words for. How would you advise them if there's, like, you know, if there's anybody listening to us who would maybe need advice right now? What would you say? Or let's start with what would you tell your younger self right now?
Well, it's a very good question. First of all, it needs quite a lot of thinking. But to be frank, I would tell that child or that young girl, that younger me, and say, look, abuse is not the end. You can't say, I'm a victim of abuse. What you should say is, I survived abuse. Because if you have got this victim stamp on you, you won't be able to rise. You know, you remain there as a victim. You know, if there is anything that I fought, well, I didn't fight really. You know, those words from my uncle who said, you'll be a prostitute. You know, that is a way to reduce a child.
Yes.
To submit, you know. So I would advise that young Nomazulu me, that younger child me, and say, look, never accept victimhood. It doesn't matter how it's like, you know. Let me give you an example. In my family, you know, I somehow got a child and I had to raise this child, you know, on my own, you know. There was a chance that I could have married and gone to Tanzania because the father of my son was Tanzanian, and he was saying, look, I'll take you to Tanzania, and, you know, this is how trauma works. You know, trauma can be negative and can be positive, you know. Trauma will tell you that, look, all those people who were, you know, insulting and so, show them. Show them. So there I was trying to show my brothers that, look, I can have a child and then look after that child very well. I have done that. But my question is that not trauma itself? To put yourself in that, you know, because, you know, life becomes a hammer and everything else is a nail, you know, ready to But honestly, I would advise any young person who has undergone, who has gone through serious sexual abuse when they were children or when they were young girls, not to take that as victimhood, but say, I'm a survivor, I survived. And life goes on. Life goes beyond abuse. You know, you can't sit down and then say, my uncle or my brother-in-law, because, you know, there are so many people who are abused, you know, down the line, you know, you can't count them, you know. So you tell yourself that it happened, but I survived. Now look.
How would you also advise, maybe this could be one of my last questions on this topic, like it comes along with a lot of stigmata, and I think, and shame.
Yes.
And that is a very fragile part before you actually get to the part where you say, okay, I'm a survivor, right? And I don't want to look at myself as a victim.
Yes.
Especially, I'm ready to show those people who tried to keep me down that they were not successful.
Yes.
Right? And they will not be successful. But there is this part, I bet you, that everybody comes along with shame and the stigmata and much more worried about, if I should go that way, that direction, how do I deal with the approach of other people, right? Like, it can also be in a partnership, right?
Yes.
That due to the trauma, you don't want to be intimate, for example.
Yes.
Right? This brings stigmata on the woman, right? So is there an advice which you would have for young ladies?
It's a tricky question. I would have first of all said, you know, when we grew up, we grew up with shame. You know, shame was fed on us. You know, blame. You know, it's like shame has become a virtue in African societies. You know, you only mention, she was abused, and then you're so ashamed. But you're a child. The person who abused is not ashamed. You see, this is the thing. But it's not easy to tell young children, young people, 14, 15, and 18, to say, look, you are not a victim, and the people who are supposed to be are the people who, you know, who abused. You know, not you. But you know, it's not easy really. But whoever came to me, I would say, no, it's not your try and tell yourself that you are not to blame. And as much as possible, you know, shame is such a tool in African societies. You know, it's, you know.
I have a theory on that one, and it says that we live in a rape society, so it doesn't matter, even if we look at anywhere where there are rules and regulations and also authorities who allow abuse to happen and not correct it immediately in a proper way, it is a rape society, right?
It is a rape society.
Exactly. So I would even say that at this point, my personal opinion, and I say this loud, my personal opinion is that it doesn't matter where we are, as long as we don't have regulations and laws, justice that really emphasize on that abuse is abuse, and the one who is where it's inflicted on doesn't have to feel shame. That's as long as we stay in a rape society.
Lorraine, it's better said than done, because, you know, shame is a very powerful tool. You know, we grow up with, you know, with it. You know, if it's inflicted at an early age, it starts with sitting, for instance. Sit properly, you know, don't show your genitalian, you know, because if you did, honestly, an old person would see genitalian from a young girl, and it becomes a problem for him. That society should be something else, you know, because children play, you know, and Tell me what type of dressing did we have? We only had a dress. You know, when I grew up, I only had one dress. Unless if I went to school, you know, there was a dress code. You must have a uniform and an underpant. But what happened when you get home? You take your uniform out and you take your underpant. You wear that home dress.
Exactly.
And you played as a child. You know, but you'll be told, sit properly. Yeah, there are men around.
True.
And that is shame. It will bring you shame, you know. So I haven't sat properly, you know, because there are men around. Do you know how long it takes when I'm in Zimbabwe? You know, when I'm sitting down, do you know how long it takes until I've stood up? It will take about 2.5 minutes, because I will make sure that, you know,
everything is covered.
Everything is covered. You know, these chitenges, you know, these rappers.
Yeah.
These rappers are there so that, you know, we are completely covered. You know, breast cannot be covered, you know, but this part, you know, should be complete. But all the same, you know, it doesn't hinder rape cases.
It doesn't.
It doesn't. Because, you know, when I read the newspaper today, Zimbabwe newspaper, you know, how many children, how many babies are raped? You know, how many young children, toddlers, young children, you know, because, you know, there is this, you know, if you are HIV positive and you sleep with a virgin, then that HIV,
the wrong, false information about HIV,
false information about HIV, that, you know, a virginity cures HIV. So that's why they target young children, you know. So really, when you talk about rape culture, you start to wonder, where did it come from, you know. I have written quite a lot about rape culture in Zimbabwe, you know. I always say rape culture came from the liberation movements.
Okay. Why would you say that?
Because, you know, in these camps where we were, oh God, you know, rape used to take place almost every day, you know. Oh yes, you know, serious situations, you know. You know, they will say, yeah, we came, there will be soldiers around. And then they will say, yeah, they should protect these girls at night, you know. As a matter of fact, they would come at night and rape, you know, women. So I always think they don't agree with me because, yeah, they think I'm radical, you know. But, you know, this culture of rape, you know, came from liberation movements, especially in Zimbabwe, especially in South Africa, you know. These two countries, you know, every 90 minutes, you know, in Zimbabwe, a girl is raped, a child is raped, you know, a young woman is raped, you know. Every 5 minutes in South Africa, you know, a toddler is raped, a girl is raped, a young woman is raped. And in Zimbabwe, you know, they go as far as going to the villages where very old people live, 85-year-old. Go into our website and look, you know, where it says news.
Yes.
Go and see how many grandmothers within 7 days, were raped in villages. Because they think that an 85-year-old grandmother is HIV free. Then they are targeted there.
Wow.
You know.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I need.
Well,
So I thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for you being here and being open and sharing some of your biography with us. And I know that I have taken so much out of this, right? I wish we could go on and on and on, but we also have a time limit.
Yes.
I really appreciate the talk with you, and it will be continued. We will come back here. We will have more conversation with you, and you will probably share more of your life with us. And yeah, thank you for being with us, and tune in next time.
I wish to thank you very much for having me.
Yeah.
And it was a very pleasant interview. And that's how children or girls or young women who have gone through what I've gone through, they can be inspired by such interviews. And I also have I wrote a book too, and with the hope that, girls, young women, can read it and say, we are not victims as such, we are survivors. And surviving means putting that behind your back, and then, getting the strength, that stubborn strength of a woman to move on.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Babalo sedi kandima na aida sedi kandima inana mampisa Baba Kamara italingo Kadija lola sedi baba inana mampisa Kante Yara Soma Kadida Bola Seri Atele Dendiko Karajali Masae Inana Mampisa Amina Taba Pulo Benye Jamani Birimen Nantata Ya Kante Bunyale Anala Moyamba Ami La mini for the game, Italy, in a man